Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this week's Water Cooler Wednesday. You may be watching us from Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're tuning in. You're in for something really special today. And I hope that the reason we do these things live is that it gives you the opportunity to interact with us live, to ask questions directly to our guests. So, any thoughts you have, or questions, or experiences that you want to share with us, please chime in on whatever platform you're on, and we will interact with you live right here with Rabbi Shlomo Buxbaum. If you are watching this, you're watching the replay, continue to comment, ask questions, etc., and we'll monitor those as well. But I want to introduce you all to a guest that I'm super excited to have on. And we sort of had this fake out before because we were supposed to have Rabbi Buxbaum on, and then my son got sick, and it was one of those deals, and I had to cancel on him, and that was awful. And a lot of you reached out and said, "I'm so sorry I missed it." I'm like, "No, we missed it," but thankfully. We got Shlomo back here. There were a lot of Jewish holidays that we had to get through first. But we are so excited to have you here today, Rabbi Buxbaum. Thank you for being
Thank you,
here.
David. Thank you. And I'm excited to be here and excited to converse virtually with your audience. And yeah, there were a lot of holidays. So had a lot of time to think about our time together.
Yeah, perfect. And it gave me time to actually read your book so I don't have to fake it. So, Rabbi Shlomo Buxbaum is a rabbi, author, and the director, and a lot more things. A coach, a speaker. He's also the director of the Lave Experience, which is a Jewish engagement initiative in the greater Washington, D.C. area. He has lectured throughout the U.S. and is the host of the Empowered Jewish Living podcast. In 2021, Rabbi Shlomo released his book, The Four Elements of an Empowered Life, a
You got it.
guidebook to discovering your inner world and unique purpose. He lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, with his wife, Devorah, and their 6 children. People are shocked every time I tell them I have 5. So I think you may be the first person on here to beat me with that number.
You know what? Once you have 5, just go for 6.
Yeah,
It's
especially
right
when the
there.
older ones are old enough to help, right? Change diapers. All right, so I warned you there's going to be 6 and 60, or 6 rapid fire questions. That's how we get these things started. You ready?
Okay, you got it. Let's go.
All right. 6 in 60. Here we go. What is the one thing that you would like to see stick around after this pandemic?
The one thing that I would like to see is the fact that people felt a sense of calm. There was no sense of just having to run around. There was a certain feeling where it's just okay to be and to be present.
Great. When you're feeling overwhelmed or burned out, speaking of being calm, when you're feeling overwhelmed or burned out, what do you do to reset and recharge?
I like to take very, very long walks. And on those walks, I usually like to think back about the things that are working in my life to sort of give myself somewhat of a reset by keeping track of, like, just taking score, giving myself kind of a scorecard. How are things doing? And I'll go way back and be like, you know what, these are certain things from my last 10 years that I'm proud of. How are we doing in these areas? Really just to take stock of my life. Even the most simple things, I'll review this in my head. This is who I am. These are my values. This is what's important. This is where I'm doing well. This is where I'm falling short. And then just these long walks in nature, trying to reset, typically help me to refocus.
Wow. 2 things. One, you're awful at 6 and 60, but I love these
Did
answers.
I go over or under?
We're like on question 2, and I think it's been 20 minutes, but I love that answer. So many people, they start ruminating about all the things that are going wrong in their life, and you just sort of flip the switch and start thinking about the things that are going right. If we stop now, people would walk away with value just from that. A long walk where you start thinking about how far you've come and the things that have gone right. I love that.
Got it. So, 1 second. Was it supposed to be all six in 60 seconds?
Yes, all six. And even if it was each question
Let's
in
start
60
over.
seconds, you failed.
Everyone,
But
come back in a
but
month from now. We're starting over.
but let's okay. So 6 in 4. You ready? We got 4 left.
Okay, let's go very quick.
You have so much going on between your speaking, writing, live experience, and with even more kids than me. What's your secret to balancing it all?
I have no secret. We just go ahead and do it and ask myself, what's the next step?
Hmm. What's one notable trait of your favorite boss of all time?
Positive feedback.
Give us the best piece of advice or wisdom you've ever received.
In 10 seconds,
Yeah, it's something like that.
play the long game.
Ooh. All right, and in 5 words or less, what's the meaning of life? You thought that you thought the other one was the hard one.
Build your inner world.
Ooh, I like that. Ties right into your book too.
Build your inner world. Oh, I got it in 4. All right, at least I got one thing right so far.
That was great.
Okay.
All right, you did it in 60 seconds plus, a couple minutes. That was great.
Got
All
it.
right,
Okay.
so I think this is a real important topic to talk about today. To talk about, what like this work as calling and what work means on like a spiritual level. Because the more I talk to people, the more it seems like they feel lost. We've had the Great Resignation, but then we followed that up with engagement scores that Gallup's been measuring for 20 odd years have dropped for the first time since they've been measuring them. 90 something percent of women say that they're looking to leave their current employer within the next 5 years. We've got and then we've got quiet quitting, where people are just sort of saying, "Nope, I'm just going to do the letter of the law, and that's it." And so I think that to talk about what work means, because there's a bigger loss here than just productivity, isn't there? So what does work mean to you? Best case scenario, what can that be for
Yeah, so
us?
I mean, a lot of the trends that you're speaking of, again, I think that it speaks to the fact that our generation wants something more out of work than the previous generations did, and that's probably a good thing. Whenever you see turmoil, turmoil doesn't necessarily mean something bad is happening. It's the the storm before the breakthrough, so that could be a good thing. And the fact that young people, our generation, the next generation, they want something more from their work, that is I think that's a positive trend. So again, I think that the first question that anyone has to ask themselves as they're going into their work is, like anything else, why are you doing it, and what role does it do you want it to play in your life? Because I don't think that work is going to be the same thing for everyone. And where you started, you mentioned, I think the spirituality of work, or you connected those two things, which don't necessarily naturally go together. Spiritual life, work life, what's the relationship between them? And these are all things that we can discuss. But I think the first step is, when a person is entering into the workforce, a question to ask themselves is, what role do I want my job to play in my life, my work to play in my life? And also to make sure that you're not expecting too much out of your job, which I think what I am finding is a lot of a lot of the lack of happiness that people have is often they're expecting too much out of their job.
That's such an interesting take. So people are going in there with expectations up here, and when that's not fulfilled, then they're withdrawing. Is that how you're?
Absolutely. I mean, it's we expect it we expect for our jobs. And by the way, you see the same trend. It's a related trend. You see it with marriage. You see it with spirituality. People have certain expectations. My job, is going to be a way that it's going to give me the finances that I need to pay my bills and take a vacation and put away money and give me enough that I can invest enough passive income so I could be financially free at age 45. But I also want it to be a place where everyone treats me exactly the way I want to be treated, and that I have flexibility. Flexibility is important. I want work-life balance. I also want to feel a sense of purpose. I want to feel like I'm accomplishing my life mission by what I'm doing. I want to be respected for my craftsmanship. And it's a tall order to expect everything from your job. The same way that people who get married and they want their partners to be their best friends and their therapists, and to fill all their needs, and to give them the all of the satisfaction, physical, emotional, intellectual satisfaction. And in other areas of life as well, I think that we set very, very high expectations and aren't fully realistic about what we can expect from each area of our life, which is not which is going to be different for everybody.
So interesting. So okay, so I'm not gonna don't get too excited. I'm not gonna quote your book more than once, but I do want to quote this because I thought it was really profound and powerful. You said in your book, it says it is essential for us to look at our occupations as one of the main avenues and pillars in our life mission. You go on to say it's the avenue through which we try to provide a service that will add value to the world. That is really heavy. So it does, but what I'm hearing you say is kind of pulling back on that. So in one sense, it is a pillar, but it is not the pillar. Is that sort of where you're getting at?
Correct. So let me explain it from a paradigm that the Torah teaches. Obviously, we know, and again, I don't know our audience. We have an audience, we have Jews and non-Jews, but I think that this is something that everybody could appreciate in their own way. The Torah commands us to have Shabbat. And Shabbat is a day of spirituality. It's a day of presence. It's a day of family. And one might make the argument that actually the priorities that we put on Shabbat, the way that we invest ourselves in Shabbat, are probably the most important areas of our life. The most important areas of our life. That being said, the Torah says you shall work for 6 days and rest on Shabbat. That means, as amazing as Shabbat is, and as holy as Shabbat is from the Torah's perspective, the Torah doesn't say, hey, you know what, let's do 3 and 3. 1 day work, 1 day. It's a small amount of time that we spend. My wife is the most important person in my life. But it's not necessarily true that she'll be that she'll be the one that I'll spend the most time with. My wife is also my business partner, so I spend a lot of time
So
with
it
her.
is
Right,
true for you.
right. So work. When I say in the book that it's one of the main things, it's one of the main things because number one, it's where I will likely invest most of the time in the most vibrant years of my life. It's also going to be the one that's going to force me to get out of bed in the morning more than anything else,
Mhm.
because I need money. Because Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, and the first thing God said is, get out of Garden of Eden and get to work, because you're going to have to make a livelihood. So I can't escape it, and it's really going to direct, it's going to guide me. Any major transition in my life, at least in my most vibrant years, are going to come from the necessity to work. So therefore, we have to pay a lot of attention to it. We have to view it as the main part of our mission, in the sense that it's what's driving us. That being said, we can't, if we forget that it is only a part of our mission, then it's impossible. It is impossible to find the full meaning in your work, and certainly in life, if you're putting too much into what your job is supposed to be for you.
Hmm. So how does this affect us depending on what type of occupation we have? How much should this idea of work being a pillar and a way to sort of fulfill our mission? And I think I've told you in the past, I spent a week talking to a rabbi, a priest, a pastor, and an imam, all about the purpose of life, and they were all talking about this individual mission sort of thing.
Right.
Like everybody has this individual mission. So when you're talking about mission, is that what you're talking about? Kind of like an individual journey toward the greater good? Is that if you
Indeed,
could?
and we can define if you'd like to take a moment just to, and I'm happy to give sort of my definition, the definition that I present in the book of how I understand the Torah, Jewish traditions approach to what our mission is. I mean, if that would benefit your audience, is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so um, there's a lot of focus. I write this in the introduction of the book. There's a lot of focus in the personal development coaching space as to identifying your mission by what you're good at, how you could impact the world, and how you can make money.
Hmm.
Certainly, it's a part of finding your mission, um, we can't ignore that. But it is certainly true, at least if we look back at Jewish tradition, that there is something much deeper inside of us about our life mission. Our life mission is not measured by how we change the world outside of us. It's measured by the evolution of our inner world. That's, I think, what you asked me earlier in the six
Hmm.
and what was it,
Yeah,
10
6 and
10
60.
minutes,
Yeah.
right? Um, and that is, the evolution of the person.
Hmm.
Ultimately, I have to look in the mirror, and that's where my mission will begin and end. And everything else, my job, the people that I interact with, the impact that I make on the world, how I change the world, that's all the stage. But ultimately, I go back home and I go in solitude and I look in the mirror and I say, who is Shlomo Buxbaum after all of this is said and done?
Mm.
So, yes, the job, our profession is certainly a stage by which we attempt to accomplish our mission. Part of that is going to be the impact that we're making through our job, but ultimately it is, what is the job doing in my own development as a human being? Am I becoming a greater person from this job?
So fascinating. So your book, in your book you do talk a lot about this. It's sort of like this dichotomy of about the outer world and the inner world.
Exactly,
And I
exactly.
think that that's so uh so fascinating, that really it's about working on ourselves and how that thereby impacts the external world, and working on the external world, bettering the external world somehow impacts our internal world.
Yes, exactly. And it's a give and take. It's a back and forth. And if I'm only doing one and not the other, I'm going to feel like something's going to be wrong. If I am, I'm not even going to say making a lot of money, but let's just say I'm doing something really, really important. And maybe I'm not even doing it for money. Maybe I said, you know what, I'm fine. I'm going to take, minimum wage, but I'm going to go and I'm going to do amazing, amazing, amazing things. But ultimately, what it's doing for me is it's turning me into a rotten person. And
Mm.
I can write a beautiful essay about all the things how I made the world a better place. But I know that I actually hurt people in the process. Yes, maybe I saved 10,000 people, but I really, really I became a miserable person. The people around me can't stand me. You're not going to feel happy, but you're not going to feel like, oh, I'm accomplishing my mission. I invested all of my time. I'm doing something really, really, really important. And my kids are begging for my time, and I don't have time for them. Right? At what cost? So you might say, listen, everything you look at people that are so successful by Western society standards, and they're so unhappy. Are they accomplishing their mission? Certainly looks like it from the outside in the external world, but in the internal world, they're falling apart. And one cannot realistically think that that's what they're here for. And therefore, when they go home and they look in the mirror, they know that there's something wrong, and they struggle articulating what it is, because on paper, everything looks right.
That's beautiful and tragic. And the work as meaningful scale is sort of built on very similar concepts, where it's this pull between others and self, and also being and doing,
Right.
and meaning happens in the middle of all of that. And that it seems very similar to the way you're describing this, where um, we really, if we're just focused on helping others and we're destroying ourselves in the process, that's not helping. It's not living our mission. And if you are helping yourself and not helping others, that's not doing completing your mission, right? So I love that. I love that perspective on it. But I guess that brings me to, how much should your does your job dictate, like, the passion that you feel, or the sense of purpose that you have in your work, if really so much of it is internal? So you followed this career path to become a rabbi and an advisor, a spiritual advisor, a business advisor, and so you're going out there and you are having a objectively meaningful impact on people, right, through your work. There are a lot of people that every day they go and they work within their bureaucratic organization, or they go and they work on an assembly line, just putting, lug nuts on machines or whatever it is. I don't know what a lug nut is, but that sounds like something you'd put on a machine. And so, how important is it to find work that we're passionate about versus find passion in the work that we're doing, or that we've found?
Right. Right. The second thing that you said, I think, is really the answer, and that is that um, whatever job you have, even if it looks to the public eye as the most meaningful or the least meaningful, it's about finding the passion in that, because it's there in every position, but it looks so different. The same way everyone's mission is so specific, is so unique. Let's talk about, because you began your question asking me about my role as a rabbi. I had a certain picture of what it would be to be a rabbi. I thought that every single moment about being a rabbi would be about inspiring people, and that people would come flocking towards me because they wanted my sage wisdom. I thought that would have the ability to walk into any organization, no matter how dysfunctional, and be able to turn it around and build congregations and build a massive following. And the majority of my job is not like that. And like everything else, it's slugging it out. Lots of people in my profession don't last very, very long, once again, because they expect something. Social media obviously has made that problem worse, that everybody thinks that everyone else's job is just flying on private jets and taking exotic business trips. And so we read things wrong. It's easy to look at anyone's job and say, what, oh, he's a rabbi, he's doing spiritual work, it must be that it's so spiritual. At times it is, that's true. But I've also had to learn how to find meaning and find passion in the vast majority of my tasks, which are ones that are very, for lack of a better word, mundane. Speaking to whatever everyone else is doing out there, there are certain jobs that you'll be proud to say, right? Yeah, I'm proud. A person who is in the medical field is proud to say they're saving lives. A person who is a teacher is proud to say, yes, I am creating the next generation of leaders. Even though anyone out there who's listening who's a teacher knows, like, this is one of the toughest jobs. It takes so much energy. They're so underappreciated. The system is flawed tremendously, right? So it's not as glamorous on the inside, but at least it has a glamorous outlook. Someone who's a politician feels really important because they're setting policy. So yes, if that is your job, then the one will naturally look to the outcome. I'm helping people spiritually, I'm teaching, and say that's where the meaning is going to come from. Not necessarily true. It's not necessarily true. No matter what job you're in, it's going to be probably the small things, the small impacts that you make, the ones that no one's gonna, pat you on the shoulder about, pat you on the back about. It's going to be the people that you serve, the people that you help. I believe that the people you look around, your coworkers, are probably a major part of your missionhood in your job, because those are the people that you're spending time with. And can you develop? Can you adapt? Can you work together with them? Every workspace that I've been into is like an explosion waiting to happen. I mean, I think that we might have discussed this in the past. Like, I cannot even imagine what a workspace that doesn't have work politics even looks like, because people are so sensitive in the workspace and want to be recognized, and everyone feels overworked and underpaid. So a lot of the missionhood is going to come from just how you handle that grind and how your work fits in. When you look at the overall picture of your life and say, is my work playing the right amount? Is it taking up the right amount of space in my life vis-a-vis everything else that I'm supposed to be juggling?
Yeah, I think listening to you talk about that, I know that I'm guilty of, on social media. I post myself on stages. I post myself when I'm traveling. And all of that's sort of the glorious part of my job, but I don't take selfies of me with my horribly ADHD brain sitting down every other day of the year, trying to read and write for hours on end. I don't think there'd be a lot of engagement on posts like that or interest in posts like that. But that's really the crux of what I do every day. I know for me, in order to motivate myself toward that work, I need to connect the dots. And what I suggest to leaders a lot is that a lot of times people need help seeing the bigger picture, connecting with the bigger picture, and connecting those dots. Otherwise, everything seems just trivial and sort of like busy work, and just it's the grind.
Yeah. Yeah, I had an interesting conversation on my podcast with someone a few weeks ago, and we were discussing the parallel to sports. So, lots of people love when they watch sports. They love watching high scoring games. They fall in love with the Tom Brady's, and they fall in love with people because of their success. They love watching championship teams. Nobody pays attention to the team that has a losing record, but sometimes, and I remember this also, just this kind of teaching moment that I had with my own kids who are now trying to root for the Wizards, and it hasn't been going well. And sometimes, I tell them, like, don't only, because again, when you're a kid, you think like it's championship or bust. Like, there's nothing else. Like, you either won the championship or you're a loser, or make the playoffs or you're a loser. And I said, no one ever pays attention to the team that won 10 games one season. I'm talking basketball, 10 games one season, and then bumped it up to 25, and they still didn't make the playoffs. But isn't it interesting to see like what they did? Everyone loves the player that's winning championships, but what about that player who is literally doing something for his team that nobody else is doing? So I think that for us, we need to become more in tune to appreciating the grind, appreciating the things that people don't normally see. Because for most, listen, if you are going to be the president of the United States or the Dalai Lama, right, or the biggest pop singer, whatever, or the biggest movie star, so fine, you might know that success looks a certain way for you, but most of us are not going to be that. And we need to learn what success looks like for us just in the daily grind, which is why when you asked me earlier what is the most powerful advice, to me it's right, understand things based on like the long term, the day in, the day out, the consistency, the grind.
Yeah, that the grind is sort of the majority of your time, and if you're not finding some sort of meaning in that, then there's a lot of emptiness in that space, right?
Yeah.
So, but we enter the pandemic, and then on the other end of it, we have all of these worldwide issues of people, whether they're searching for meaning, or they're just lost, or they are rejecting the workplace because they're not finding it there. It's not fulfilling in whatever sense they are looking for fulfillment through their work. You said that this is sort of like the storm that comes before, the clear skies. That this is necessary. Where do you see this leading? What's the answer? What's the answer to this when we've got employers watching who are can't find people, period, to come on board, and then when they do, they can't find them to give that 110% that they've always relied on. What's the solution here?
I mean, I don't know the solution, but as far as where it's all going to go, one would have to imagine that over time the workspace itself, the work environment itself, is going to change. I'd like to believe that um, that bosses, leaders of companies, and entrepreneurs who are trying to expand their business will realize that we live in an era where people want to work for people because the workspace itself is one where there'll be a lot of respect. I mean, even if you just look at the nature of how the world has changed up until now, it's always a good way to project to the future, just to see how the evolution has led us until now. The workspace has totally changed. I remember this the whole new concept of, like, I think when Zappos started doing it, and then maybe Google started doing it, where suddenly work culture became a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely, those who could create a positive work culture, humble leaders, great and humble and fearless leaders, people who could create that sort of environment, that's going to attract younger people. Younger people want to be part of, so they're not as much looking for dollars, and they are realizing that you can't mistreat people anymore. It's not a thing. It's not even down to teenagers. Right? They know that when they're not being treated properly, right, they'll walk out. So the whole structure of how we hire, of how we attract people to our workplace, I think that's where the evolution is going to be. And people are going to realize that the way that you get someone to come work for you is by the same tools that you get someone to, come on a vacation, to make it so absolutely beautiful and so attractive. People want to work there, not because of the paycheck that they're getting at the end of the month, because this is a space that I want to be. This is a space that's going to respect me, that's going to build me up, that's going to support me in my growth, and just a place that I'm going to want to come into every single day.
And so when you say that, when you say entice people the same way you would, a vacation, the first thing I thought was exactly what so many organizations did wrong when we were so focused on culture, that they would have concerts and they'd have break rooms with masseuses and, like, all this stuff, and they were very shallow things. But then you went on to say, a sense of belonging and meaning, and all of those things. It's the deeper things,
Correct.
when you're
Correct.
talking about that.
Correct. The mindset is to ask oneself, all of those things. Yes, that is a great first step, because it's asking, okay, I want them to be excited about being here. So what do I have to do to get them to come? And yeah, so it's certainly okay to experiment, but like everything else, even if a person wants to have a life of partying, so you go to one party, you go to the second party, and then inevitably, right, you're like, okay, I want to travel the world, and you go to to Ibiza, and you go to all of these places, and then and then suddenly you see the nature of people like that who love to travel. Suddenly they're starting to go to places where they're searching, right? They're trying to discover things. So yes, you want to put yourself in the space of what people look for, and yeah, there's got to be some of that, but ultimately you're right, it has to be something that's going to be deeper, that's going to really feed people's souls.
Right. And, I can't not think about your book and how you talk about the different elements, and you really present them kind of as like sort of a personality assessment sort of build, that some people are more connected toward different elements that the world was sort of built on, right? And so, how much of this is requires that sort of flexibility where there's no right answer, that it's different for each individual.
The goal of the Four Elements book was not so much for a person to say I am, and there is some of that in the book, but it's not the beginning of the book. It's one chapter at the end where, but I'll often open a new talk and I'll ask an audience. I'll say, raise your hand if you think that you're like earth. Raise your hand if you think that you're like fire. Raise your hand if you think that you're like water. Raise your hand if you think that you're like wind, because people like personality assessments, and it certainly helps. But the ultimate purpose of the book is to realize that we all have all four, and realizing that there are certain needs and aspects of ourself that are like earth, that want stability, that live cautiously, that live with a certain aspect of fear, and therefore we need consistency in our life like earth. That there is the water part of us, there is an emotional part of us that needs love, that needs connection, and how deep can we go. There's a part of us that is like wind, that is always searching, that wants to grow in our knowledge, that wants to feel that we're expanding in our goals. And there's a part of us that's like fire, that we want to know that we're rising, that we're climbing a certain ladder. We all have all of that, and therefore in our life meaning is going to come when we're addressing all of those parts of ourselves. So that's the goal of the Four Elements. But it's also interesting to think about, okay, well, which aspect of me is dominant at this certain time? Because if a person is finding, why do I have such trouble getting up in the morning every single day? Why am I struggling so much with sadness and with depression? What am I so upset about, right? My life is fine, and yet I'm still. So then, okay, you know what? You might be a little heavy on the earth. Or if, let's say, a person is finding that they're overindulging, right? They're becoming addicted to self-indulgence in any single way. Okay, something must be missing in your life, because that's not normal that you should need so much in terms of the escape, in terms of the indulgence. So it helps you to understand where there might be an inner imbalance. So it's a personality assessment, not to say you're this and not that, but just to understand where you might be lacking.
Love it. And we try to build from the ground up, right?
From the ground up, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I'm tempted to ask you this question, but I also don't want to add oxygen to the current dumpster fire. But
Okay.
maybe I'll just ask it. The Kanye West or Ye, right?
Yay.
That he has been broadcasting this very specific sort of negative view, mostly negative, although some things he literally says he's jealous of, right? But this negative view of Jewish business practice. It's a very different picture than the one that you have sort of laid out for us today. The spiritual view of work through Jewish mysticism, I guess, right? Um, what do you think? What do you think the truth is with Jewish business? Like, is he right? Is he wrong? Is it just misunderstood? Are these just bad actors
Yeah.
that he's specifically talking about?
You
I'll
know
give you the
the
stage because I didn't know if I even wanted to address it, but now it's yours. That's
the Talmud says that in every single area, the greater a person is, the greater the dangers are. And the people that, if you take a look at just the history of spiritual leaders, there's been great spiritual leaders in our history, great mystics. I don't only mean within the world of Judaism, in any practice. And yet we find that there are gurus, there are priests, there are imams, there are rabbis who go sour and will often use their dynamism, their wisdom. They'll use it for the wrong way. There's no guarantee in the world of, well, let's just talk about even a Jew who's a practicing Jew, which means that they're doing all the things that they're supposed to do to achieve spiritual greatness. There's also temptation. There's also danger in that, and therefore there'll certainly be bad apples. Obviously, if you take a look back at our history, Jews have been both very, very wealthy and very, very poor. Right? We've had the full spectrum of things. Poor Jews don't attract that much attention because they're poor. But there has been as long as any country that we've been, that the Jewish people have been in, if we weren't actively under persecution, right, we were figuring out a way to be successful. And I think that that speaks a lot about how we operate. The Jewish people are a small nation that have gone from place to place, and we've always had to learn to adapt and rebuild and rebuild. And this is from our core, right? The Torah introduces us as a people that began as a slave nation. So, yes, it is in the fabric of how we operate, how we're raised, and what we study, that we should try to achieve in whatever area. If it's to achieve spiritually, to achieve financially, right? That is what we look for. And um, if you want to focus on successful Jews that were just beautiful, beautiful people, I mean, the amount even today. Yes, there's tremendous wealth. The amount of charity that comes out of the Jewish community is incredible. The amount of kindness that people show, the amount of home hospitality, the fact that anyone knows that if they're down and out, right, if you're part of the community, you are not alone. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful community. That being said, when there is such wealth and such power, are there going to be bad apples in the mix? Yes, there are going to be as well. Are there going to be bad landlords? Are there going to be manipulative businessmen? Are there going to be awful bosses? Of course, there's going to be. Um, was that Kanye's experience? I don't know. I've only heard sound bites, so it's hard for me to comment on what his experience was. It could be that he did have that. Um, are Jews going to definitely apply pressure when someone is out there, spewing things that sound anti-Semitic? Well, I mean, I don't think that we should be surprised about that. I don't think that it's cancel culture that companies pulled out of Kanye. I mean, we're not trying to cancel his political opinions. We're trying to, cancel his hate speech, which is dangerous for us. It's a matter of life and death. So there's probably some jealousy, but there probably are some bad apples that he's come across. And I think just the most important thing is, we always want to say, like, don't judge an entire people by the people that you've interacted with. I don't think that that's fair for any culture, and certainly not of the Jewish people. And I think that overall, if you ask within the wealthy Jewish community how the Jewish community handles their wealth, I think that one would be very, very impressed by the amount of charity and the amount of giving and the amount of genuine care and philanthropy that comes out of the Jewish community. I think is something that's beautiful.
Great. I'm glad I did ask that then, and I'm also glad I didn't ask it during the 6 and 60. That's excellent. That's but
Wait, that
I
wasn't 60 seconds.
I know that you're on a tight schedule today because you told us how many things you do.
Okay.
But I really want to give people the opportunity to reach out and to continue the conversation and to learn more. So if any of you put your phone up above Rabbi Buxbaum's QR code, that'll take you to, I think, shlomobuxbaum.com or
It would take you to rabbishlomo.com, and that's
rabbiShlomo.com.
you can find a lot over there. But also, I'm easy to find on the social medias. I try to be active and interact with people on Facebook and on Instagram. So that's also a great place to connect and to learn about what I'm up to.
Great. And can't recommend this book enough. Certainly, if you are a member of the Jewish faith or a follower of the Jewish faith, for sure, But even if not, I think that there will be like real interesting takeaways if you're culturally curious and intellectually curious and want to and like to get a variety of sort of input from different areas. I think that anybody can really benefit from the book. I know that it was as inspiring as this conversation was for me. Both were extremely inspiring, and I truly appreciate you taking the time and scheduling this with me twice. So,
Twice. Let's do it
um,
again soon. Thank you, David. I
please,
enjoyed it as well, and I hope that the audience benefited from it as well. And
thank
yeah, let's do it again.
Thank you. And catch us again, or catch me with my guest, Brian Gorman, uh, in 2 weeks, 2 Wednesdays from now. We'll see you then. Thanks so much, Shlomo.
Awesome. Thank you.